So these are our 15 impact grant states. You'll notice several of them are also identified as swing states. And it's interesting that, you know, those are the areas where voter turnout really does matter. Who the electorate is really does matter. And so we want to build that electorate. And we can go ahead and go to the next slide. This is just a broad outline, and I think it might be in your woman-to-woman manuals that you have, of what we were kind of shooting for to do. And as you'll notice, everything sort of is happening now. So we've got the August election. We want to get voter registration drives done. We want to get our voter guides distributed and voter records distributed. We want to do our face-to-face and phone canvassing. We want to get our candidate issue these forms, and we want to all do this before Election Day. So, needless to say, if I didn't get up at 4 a.m. this morning, I'd be exhausted. But it's the most exciting, energizing exhaustion I could imagine, if that makes sense.
Tell us about the issue-based forums. How do you decide?
I'm going to get into that in just a minute, and but they're very exciting, and I really hope we'll definitely talk a lot about them. So next slide, to give you a little bit of background, let's talk about who millennial women are. Do we have any millennial women in the room other than me?
I don't think so.
One? Okay, and we've got daughters, I'm assuming. I think, how many have, let me look at my timeline. Anyone have a daughter or a granddaughter that fits into the millennial age? Nieces?
What's the age?
Between the ages of 18 and 31 right now is our millennial voters. Yep. And then even before that age group, we have, or even before the 18-year-olds are people of the millennial generation. We're just not thinking about them yet. We'll think about them in 2 years and 4 years. And especially now, I even feel like even the kids under 18, I was on the plane and listening to a couple of them talk, and they're using all these acronyms, and I'm like, I didn't leave high school that long ago, and I didn't know what they were talking about. They are as large a generation as the baby boomers, but they've not yet established a voting habit. And what that means is the voting habit I hope everyone has is they vote in every election. In August, they vote in November, they vote in May for school boards. Some states do it, you know, they vote in every election. But still people have a voting habit. Some people vote every presidential primary and every general election for president. Some people, but these are women who don't have a voting habit established yet, and we want to help them get into that habit. And this is the greatest opportunity to increase the number of women who vote. The greatest opportunity to increase the number of women who vote in 2012 lies in focusing on the millennials. These are people who are a Pew Research study. I have a few more statistics too in a minute, but these are confident, self-expressive, liberal, upbeat, and open to change. And I do mean liberal in the nonpartisan sense. I mean liberal like even Republicans and Democrats have supported the Equal Rights Amendment. I mean liberal as in how do we increase equality? How do we increase opportunity? And these women identify actually as liberal 2 to 1, in a ratio of 2 to 1 to for every 2 women who identify as liberal, there's only one who call themselves conservative. Their most important issues that they've asked about are the access to birth control and fair pay. Matter the most to them. They're more ethnically and racially diverse. As you know, with our immigrant population increasing, and the demographic shifts even from the 2000 to the 2010 census, we're seeing younger people as being of a more diverse and just a more diverse population. They're less religious. They're less likely to call themselves religious, but they are more likely to call themselves spiritual. I don't have too much time to go to the specifics, but imagine with the young woman you know and how you would identify in that. They're less likely to have served in the military, and that's millennials in general, not just millennial women. They're less likely to selectively enlist themselves. So this campaign is tailored around what we know from their habits. The Pew Research Center did a fantastic study, and it's actually pewresearch.org/millennials. It is a very comprehensive booklet that if you're at all interested in how our world is changing and how it's being driven by these people, it's a great resource. So we're tailoring the campaign to fit around these types of people, where they go, what they do, what they're interested in. And then these are going to be women who are aged 18 to 31 on election day. If you want to go to the next slide. They are on track to become the most educated generation in American history, which is why their one of their other major issues is college affordability. They are very concerned with whether or not they can afford to go to college. People like me who started college before 2008 and felt more comfortable about getting loans and getting them paid off, and then all of a sudden, you know, I'm sitting in my class and I'm hearing about how the stock market just dropped 500 points in an hour, and then you get really terrified, and now I'm sitting on loans and I'm wondering, am I going to get a job that pays me fairly? Am I going to be able to pay back my loans? Is my college degree worth the investment? And what I've had to wrestle with is that even though I might not make as much, or I might make only as much as I could have made without my college degree, I'm investing in the ability to do a job I want to do, but I'm not necessarily investing in a career or a salary. So their experience entering the workforce is shaped by the Great Recession. I can give you anecdotally, I have a couple of friends who are 26 and 27 and having a hard time finding jobs, but I have two friends who actually just graduated, and they've got similar backgrounds, all U of M grads, who had no problem. So there is hiring happening now where it hadn't happened for a couple of years, but I'm worried, and I've read a couple of studies that back this up, that there's a block of people ages 25 now to about 30 who missed out on a lot of hiring because of all the unemployment that was happening, and they're almost getting passed by because they're far away from college, they're really young, the people that the employers are looking for, and then they don't have the experience to back up that additional time out of college. So it's going to be an interesting thing. That's just sort of a Julie pontification about something. And then adept with social media. So Facebook is probably the only social media I really use. I have a Twitter. I don't get it. Most people do. You know, my friends do. I have a couple of friends who do and use it and love it, and I'm just like, really? Call me and tell me about this article, or send me the link so I can read it myself. But anyway, I'm an anomaly because everyone else uses it. There's also Tumblr, which I'm really actually starting to like. That was one that I refused to get into. I figured I don't do Twitter, I'm not going to do Tumblr. And I actually like it because it's quick, it's images, it's not even text. It's like, oh, I found this and this is cool, and you know, so I can just look at all my friends and this is kind of what they liked and checked out this day. I don't have anything myself, but I can stalk other people. So they use these sorts of things. This is how they communicate. So even if they're not in person, they don't gather at certain places, they don't meet up at the library, they don't meet places for a book club, or, well actually my friends and I do meet and we knit. We have a different name for it, but we, you know, we do those things, but we hang out on the internet. And literally Google has a thing called Hangouts where we can be there virtually on our computer screens. And it works for us as a generation. It doesn't work for me because I actually like my friends and want to spend time with them, but as a generation, it's a good thing. You can switch to the next one for me. So we want to target these people, so we want to seek them out and or bring them to us. So we do this through campus outreach, young professional groups, the internet, fairs, markets, and other community events. One thing that I absolutely love is actually, I have a couple of branches in mid-Michigan, if you're familiar, actually up towards Bay City and that kind of area, but they're going to food banks, which serve homeless families or at-risk homelessness families, or people who have questionable housing situations, or housing crisis actually is the term. And so these are young families, usually young moms and their kids. So they're going to go and register voters there. So the nice thing about that sort of situation is, well, it's a blessing and a curse. When, from a voter registration standpoint, I would never say that it's a good thing that that's not what I meant. But from a voter registration, these are people who need to be empowered, and it's an easy way to get to them because they will come to the food banks once a week or once a month, depending on the distribution schedule. But it's tough because they have to know where they're going to live 30 days prior to the election. And they have to live there for those 30 days. So when you're in transient housing and you're living with one relative this week and one relative the next week, where do you register? I always tell them, register where you live now. Are you going to be moving that far away from that place? No, you're probably going to be staying within a few miles of it. Register where you are now. You'll get a voter registration card. That's where you're going to vote. I don't say anything more. I don't say anything less. And therefore, I have not done anything that might violate or look like it is in violation of election laws. But it's the best way I can get to empower people. So you seek them out, and then you bring them to you. Cocktails and combos are great. Believe me, I got to, even before I got involved and saw that there were at a bar that I tend to go to, or at a restaurant, or nearby, someplace that I would typically go. And on this night, we're going to be talking about fair pay and college affordability for young women. I'd go. And I know a lot of my friends would go, and I would bring a lot of my friends. So it's actually a really great opportunity to do things that we do. Also bring them to you through the internet, again with Facebook. Everybody, frequently when I invite people to events, they're saying, can you send me the Facebook link? Because then it's all saved in one spot for them, and they can get their map, and then they can get their times, and it's all organized together. And other networking events, so college fairs, job fairs, that sort of thing are great ways to seek them out and bring them to you. Next. So, millennial women, who we're targeting really. So I mentioned how young women don't have a voting habit if they have voted. So if you remember in 2008, there was a huge surge in young people voting because the presidential campaigning resulted in a lot of newly registered voters and a lot of turning out of new voters. But the presidential campaign was focused on that, and they're not necessarily focused on really creating a habit in these people for the future. They want that, but they're not focused on spending their resources to make that happen, which is where we can come in and really support that role and connect with those people who voted in 2008 but didn't vote in 2010. They're newly registered, so we can access lists. It's a public information of when people registered to vote. We can get to the people who registered between today and a year and a half ago and say, well, they're newly registered to vote, and we want to get them out to the polls because they've never voted wherever they're registered before. So we need to remind them where to go, and we need to remind them to go. And then people who we personally registered to vote, these are our priority targets. Because if nothing else, we're registering voters to empower the individual. Even though we like big numbers and we like to say, oh yeah, our group did great, we registered 150 voters, I could care less. When I registered one voter and talking with her for 10 minutes about what mattered to her, and I was able to tell her how her government was going to make decisions on these issues in the next 2 years, and she registered to vote, it was worth the 2 hours if I didn't get anyone else registered. It really was for me personally. And I know it's tough because especially being in groups like the AAUW, you're busy women, you have a lot of things that you do. So it's tough to say I'm going to spend my 2 hours to do this, but you have to remember that it really is about that individual that you've registered at that moment. But that said, I have had branches that have done up to 500 registrations in one afternoon. So it just is all about targeting. And then people who moved recently and need to re-register. So the biggest thing that I tell people is when you ask someone, hey, are you registered to vote? And they say, oh yeah, I'm good. And it's like, but have you moved recently? Don't let them get away before you ask them when they moved last. Especially young people. College students, every year they're going to change apartments practically. Some will stay the same. Some like me who hate moving will do everything they can to stay where they are. But that doesn't mean that I still didn't have to move home over the summer. So, and whether or not I wanted to be registered because I had to vote in the school board election, and then if I needed to be registered there in the primary, and all that, you want to make sure people are registered to vote where they live right now, or where they're going to live on election day. And they move a lot. We do different jobs, different schools, that sort of thing. So, and then you also want to remind everyone who are eligible to vote via absentee ballot. Guaranteed votes. They have the ballot in their hands. There's no reason they can't flip it over, fold it in half, and drop it in the mailbox or drop it in the clerk's 24-hour lockbox. You want to make sure those absentee ballots definitely get returned. Okay. So building coalitions. The best way to do any of this work is to make partnerships between different groups. We want to partner between AAUW and League of Women Voters. I have a great issue in candidate forum story on that one. We want to partner with different organizations. The National Organization for Women has been a good partner to us in Michigan. We've actually, because of some frightening things going on in the Michigan legislature, we partnered with Planned Parenthood, we partnered with the Coalition of Labor Union Women, we partnered with the Nurses Union, and a couple of other groups that we've worked with. And we built those coalitions. And now, whenever any of those people have events, they tend to call me and say, can you bring a voter registration drive to our table, or to our event? And we do it. And then I can call them and say, I'm doing voter registration in Livonia, which is a city outside of Detroit, at the Kroger, on Schoolcraft, between 2 and 3 on Saturday. Can you call your members who live in Livonia and have them come and volunteer? I feel like we're going to get a lot of people, and I need as many people with clipboards as possible. Can you get me 2 or 3 volunteers for 2 hours apiece? And then they'll do it. And it's all about building those relationships, because I'm not calling CLUE, Coalition of Labor Union Women, I'm calling Jessica. I'm saying, Jessica, I need your help on this. And we're friends, and we work together, and we've got this common goal, and we believe in it together, and we're going to make it happen for each other. So respect, obviously, you want to do unto thy allies. You know, you want to make sure that you respect their mission, and you respect what they're trying to do, and understand sometimes if those conflicts, occur. Now is also C3 and C4, and we just have to be careful with that. They're a great organization, and we want to respect, they have a particular lobbying group, and we respect that. They respect what we're doing as voter registration, and we work together fantastically, and it's a great relationship. So we want to stay in touch, we want to talk early, and we want to talk often, and we want to make sure that we let them know what we're up to, and they let us know what they're up to, and then we can divide and conquer, but then we can also come together and really conquer as well. So sharing, that's another thing. You don't want to reinvent the town hall meeting. If the League of Women Voters is doing a candidate forum, the AAUW doesn't necessarily need to be there, but they need to promote it to their members and promote it to the young women that they've registered and the young women that they've contacted. So we don't need to do our own necessarily if there's going to be a candidate forum. We want to get involved and say, could you talk about these questions with the candidates, and how can I help you get some young women there, and work together in that way. So next slide. So voter registration is our focus right now, and it's our focus in Michigan at least until October 9th when the registration deadline is. We want to make sure that we contact all those people, and we want to contact as many people as possible, as many ways as possible, and get people registered before the deadline. In Michigan at least, 90% of people are in fact registered to vote, but we only have turnout between 50 and 70%. Our highest are 70, but it's typically somewhere around 60. So where is that missing group? And these are the people who don't have the voting habit, or they're unclear of the voting regulations, or misinformation has been sent around that they can't vote if they don't have a voter ID or a photo ID, and that's not true. You can vote if you don't have a photo ID. You have to sign an affidavit. But for some people, what is an affidavit? They don't know what that means. You just have to say to them, you just sign a piece of paper that says, I swear that I don't have photo ID in my possession. It's very simple, it's very easy, it's no problem. But there's a lot of misleading and misinformation and voter suppression tactics out there. So when we register voters, it limits who can vote in an election, and it's a hurdle to overcome. If you want to go to the next slide. But it's not a voter turnout technique. It's a way to increase the amount of electorate, but just getting someone registered isn't going to turn them out. In fact, I can tell you that if you register someone, unless you remind them to vote, they're probably not going to vote, because they've never done it before, and they really don't know what it's about or why they should bother. Because of, again, the misinformation and voter suppression going on. So we want to, it's critical, we want to get them registered if they're not, and we want to make sure they're registered at the right address. But it's really, what it really serves as is our first connection with this potential voter. There's a reason they were willing to talk to us, you know, these young millennial women. American Association of University Women. There's a reason that they wanted to talk to us, there's a reason they were willing to talk with us about the issues, and there's a reason they were willing to fill out the form and trust us to send it in for them. So we need to follow up on that trust in that initial meeting of respect and turn them out to vote, and then we are far more likely to get them to turn out. So that is voter registration in a nutshell. If we want to go to the next slide, actually, we can go back one. I wanted to talk about one more thing. The best ways to register voters who are young millennial women, the easy way is college campuses. And I would recommend you get with your college campuses. Larger universities typically have active student groups that will do those sorts of things, or have active groups that will go to them. Sometimes in Michigan, the Secretary of State or local clerks will sometimes do those programs. Still investigate and find out if there's a program at your local university. Community colleges, however, are frequently less targeted, and they are more in need. And these are usually people who actually run the age. They're not necessarily just recent grads. These are also people who are older and returning to school to get new job training and that sort of thing. So I would highly encourage you to work with your community colleges. In September coming up, most of the branches that I'm working with do plan to be at least one local college or university, community college, to register new students at their student activities and welcome to the college fair, which all of them usually have, and it's usually a one-day or a two-day afternoon thing. And all of the branches usually walk away with, well, all of the areas that have done it in the past, because the League of Women Voters has done this typically every year. In non-election years, they get about 100 new registrations. In election years, that's much higher. So it's definitely a good way to get involved if you just have 5 people who want to do one voter registration event. Call your local community college and say, when can we come? We want to help get your students registered. And if there is a group that's already doing it, how can we help them? And then voter registration leads into the big part of the voter turnout, the GOTV Get Out the Vote efforts. One of the studies, the Analyst Institute is a great group that studies election behavior and voting behavior in people, and what works and what doesn't in terms of GOTV activities. And one of the things that they found most effective was having voters fill out, self-address a postcard, and then drop it in the mail to them and remind them to vote a couple of days before the election. So AAUW National is providing to all the impact grant states these postcards, which have a stamp. They're pre-stamped. You just fill out your name and address, You also have a part where you can check what topics matter most to you: fair pay, college affordability, and there's one other one on there, and I'm sorry, it's escaping me. And I pledge to vote on this day, or I pledge to vote absentee, or I pledge to vote by early voting, so you can choose which one you want to do. And then you can also fill out your name and your email and your phone number, and we can contact you via phone or email then to remind you again in a different way and have a conversation with you. And then just by sending them that postcard and then getting that postcard in the mail, it increases their likelihood of voting. You know what, I can't remember exactly what the number is, and I don't want to guess, but it was significant. It was a very significant number, and enough so that the National said we're going to pay 32 cents per postcard, and we're going to send them to you pre-stamped to fill them out. But it's a really significant. So while you're registering voters, I didn't bring too much because I wasn't sure necessarily what the League of Women Voters were going to present, and in Michigan at least, they're very big into voter registration, and they have a lot of great resources. I did find out that I was blown away that Indiana had this, that you can register online, which is incredible, which I would strongly urge if you can do anything. Social media wise, connect with all of the young women you know and encourage them to register online. And you might even want to work together as the national board to set up a Facebook page which has this link and has the It's My Vote logo on it, and then you can use that and have all of your members send it, and then have everybody you know send it to as many people as they know. And they click the link, they fill out the form, and they're registered to vote. And it's amazing, and I hope that that's something that you can definitely hop on board with. I do encourage you, if you do voter registration ideas, drives, get to know the form and really know I looked at it briefly, and it looks very nice compared to some forms that I've seen, where every box is numbered and there's specific instructions for every box that you need to fill out. In Michigan, it's required that you sign the form twice. And if you don't sign the form twice, it's null and void, and then the Secretary of State has no obligation to notify you that your form wasn't filled out properly. So, and then you have to check every box. There's a part where you can write your city or township, and if you don't check whether it's a city or a township, it could void the form. Many clerks will work and will be accommodating, but some won't, and they're really not obligated to do. So we want to make their jobs as easy as possible, because they're going to be flooded with these registration forms, and we want to make sure that they're able to, run the elections as well as possible. So we want to make sure every form we send in is properly filled out. So just keep that in mind. The Indiana website that I did look through had some great information that answered those questions. In your woman-to-woman turnout manual is a list of questions to run by those people, about running those drives and that sort of thing. And I don't know the page, but it's in there, and it's a good checklist to go through and to consider as you're doing that. Any other important things there? Does anyone else have any questions about voter registration or any concerns on that? Yes.
Are with the transient voters, are they allowed to do absentee ballots?
Yes. Now in Michigan, anyone can vote by absentee. And I'm much more familiar with Michigan, so I can give you the anecdotal. For instance, consider this. If you register by mail, in most places, and I don't know this for sure for Indiana, but if you register by mail, you do need to vote in person the first time, and either show a photo ID or sign an affidavit. If you register by mail and you need an absentee ballot, you just have to physically go to the clerk's office to request it. You can't request it by mail, but you can go to and show your ID or sign your affidavit and get your absentee ballot in the clerk's office. Also, what's nice about Michigan is that you don't necessarily have to list a mailing address as where you live. You can just describe the location where you live. So for homeless populations, they could describe whatever area they live. And most states have that option as well. One thing I will throw out there is, and you know this because Indiana's had the photo ID requirement for much longer, but it's a it's a verification of identity, not a verification of residence. You can use in Michigan, actually in Indiana, you can only use an Indiana state issued ID or a government issued ID. Right. But it's not to prove your residence, it's to prove your identity. You verify your identity. That's just something to arm your voters with if there's any reason that they might, be questioned into that, and especially with college students, if maybe their address is different than where they're voting because of school or what have you. So just keep that in mind. And these are all little tiny things that might seem overwhelming, but it's all broken down well on the Indiana website, and there's also the Fair Elections Legal Network, and I do have information, and all sorts of resources are listed in this woman-to-woman turnout manual. Any other brief things about yes?
Do you have any success going to high schools? Will they let you in to register?
Yes, actually. I believe I've heard of one city in Michigan where they did in fact go to the high schools and register voters by working with the high schools. It's all up to the discretion of the administration of the school, but as many of you are retired teachers, that's an excellent opportunity to work, to use the relationships that you've been building for your entire careers, of people who know you and know what your purpose is and your trust level is, and so you can ask, for what you need to people that you know.
I was just going to say they usually voters do that South Bend, and I'm a teacher at a large high school when we were registered 900 students in the fall. And the Sunday school did that, and we'll hopefully capture.
One comment that does involve Indiana, and I know that in some of the larger cities, the precinct numbers become an issue, especially with new voters. And some of the locations have multiple precincts. Just a little hint that I've worked with some of the younger people. Take a Sharpie marker, put the precinct number once they're registered on the back of their driver's license, because there's nothing on the back worth anything. And so when they get there, they've got to take that driver's license in Indiana, and the precinct number is on the back, and it'll stay there for multiple times. It really does help. It helps old people too.
And the League of Women Voters has excellent resources. I don't have any, but I got to kind of sneak a peek at them, and I'm going to consider doing something similar for Michigan. But exactly just like a bookmark size thing, what you need to know to go to the polls, and what you need to bring with you, sort of a thing. Kind of like a know your rights, but I don't want it, but we want it, it's much more casual than that. Like, it's just like, you've never voted before, here's how it works, guys. You know, very casually. You know, poll workers are generally there because they care about democracy. They don't want to make your life difficult. If they make a mistake or they don't know something, just be friendly and gracious and say, I'm not sure that this is right, who can I call to get help? You know, and that sort of thing. So it's all about arming people, and then there's a lot of voter rights. There is voter suppression that happens, and in areas where that happens frequently, I would recommend you work with your local League of Women Voters who know where those areas are, and then there are a lot of elections attorneys and that sort of thing that really help defend the vote.
You were talking about the transient population, and I deal a lot with them in my work, but as a clerk in the voting, we have a big book that's got everybody's addresses in it. And people bring in a different address. Well, you know, when did you? I don't remember. So we played this. You know, was it before Halloween? Was it after Labor Day? It's awful.
Yes, it is, and it's tough because, and that's why I always say to people, register to vote where you live now. If you move between now and October 9th for Michigan, go to the Secretary of State website and re-register. Give me your information, and then I'm going to follow up with those people. If I know that they're likely to move, and this is what I'm telling my food bankers, to really work hard to get their cell phone number, because that's not going to change, or their email address, because that's not going to change, and follow up with them, because in Michigan they should have got their voter ID card, their registration card, within 3 weeks of it being submitted. So we follow up with them and say, did you get your voter registration card? Did you move? Are you somewhere else? How do I get you a new voter registration form that you can send in, and follow up with those people who you think are more likely to be at risk or to be transient? Yes.
Do we know what Indiana's deadline is for registering for this?
29 days before the election,
29 days.
but sometimes they give you like an extra day because of, like, if it falls on a Saturday.
Saturday or Sunday.
October the 9th.
October the 9th. Okay, so then it's the same. And I think that's nationally, it's typically October 9th. Okay.
Okay.
Nitty gritty?
Your contact information, Julie, so that when we get in a situation that, oh my gosh, I forgot what she said or whatever.
Yes. I will have you send out an email with all of that to everyone. And also, I will say the woman-to-woman turnout manual has an additional resources section on page 50, and it has the specific phone numbers for the elections divisions for every state, and then it's got helpful websites for everybody. It lists the American Association of University Women website, which on our the AAUW Action Fund does have a lot of information on a lot of these things. I highly recommend the Fair Elections Legal Network. I highly recommend NYU Brennan Center for Justice does a student-based voter registration guide for the 50 states specifically targeted at students. And it's compiled, I believe it's a project of their law school, and it's a fabulous resource when you're talking about college students. And then I'll have Sharon email my information to all of you if you have questions. Typically, email is a great way to reach me. If it's a quick question, my cell phone I have on, and I'm happy to help you with those things. Okay, so that's voter registration in a nutshell. I will be hanging around for a little bit afterwards if you have any particular questions. I don't want to overwhelm you too much, but just point out that there are nuanced things, and to be aware of them, and then to really arm yourself with information while you do this work. at the podium.